Eli Manning is not a Hall of Famer, and I'll explain why in this video. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the NFL Honors. So I'm filming this a few hours before the NFL Honors happen in New Orleans, where they give you the MVP, the Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff. And they also go through the first cut of the Hall of Fame. Now, Eli Manning, his name has come up this week because there was a tweet where he talked about that he knows the result, but Peyton doesn't know the result. And it kind of led to people saying, like, damn, Eli's going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, which brought up the discussion of is he or is he not. Now, the video that I'm watching is from when Eli retired. All right, it's from First Things First. And this Super Bowl setup is happening all downtown New Orleans. So if you hear stuff happening, that's what's going on. The studios are right in the middle of it. So this is from First Things First 5 years ago when Eli retired. We're going to talk about current day, but we're going to use this as the backdrop. Let's rock and roll.
There's no question in my mind he's a Hall of Famer, Jenna. And I know a lot of people will point to the iconic moments that he had in Super Bowl 42 and Super Bowl 46. The throw to David Tyree, the helmet catch, which set up the Plaxico Burress go-ahead touchdown. And then, of course, the throw to Mario Manningham in Super Bowl 46 right along the sideline in between two Patriots defensive backs. I mean, B-Dub, you played in the league a long time. You know how hard it is to drop that ball into the receiver under those circumstances with that amount of pressure. But Eli Manning has always been able to deliver, especially when the lights are the brightest and the pressure is the greatest. And to me, competitive greatness has to account for something. You look at those two Super Bowl runs. I mean, those were awesome runs. He was on the road for all of the games during the Super Bowl 42 run.
Here's the question. Here's the $1 million question. Does a handful of moments and two Super Bowl runs and a clutch moment or a historic moment or whatever, however you want to frame it, do those moments overshadow or are they worth more than the entire career? In Eli's career, he is not a Hall of Famer. And we'll go over some stats here in a minute that illuminate that. Did he have some of the most iconic moments and did he have two insane runs to win two Super Bowls? Absolutely. But that is not the same, in my opinion, as saying you're a first-ballot Hall of Fame career. If we want to put him in the Hall of Cool Moments, or the Hall of, man, that was pretty cool for a minute there, or the Hall of pretty decent, that's fine. But to go from those moments, and what he's talking about is virtually 8 games. It's two playoff runs, talk about 8 games. Do 8 games, I don't care how good, do 8 games give enough to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, a designation that is pretty much for the best of the best. Now, here's some stats for Eli for his career. Eli Manning was top 5 in passing yards in a season 3 times. He played 16 years. 3 times, 3 out of 16, he finished top 5 in passing yards. 3 times he finished top 5 in touchdowns. And one of those was his second year in the NFL. He threw 24 touchdowns, and it got him top 5. Okay? He never received a single vote for anything. All-Pro first team, All-Pro second team, Rookie of the Year, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, nothing. Never got a vote. Never got an MVP vote. Never made an All-Pro team, first or second team. He was a Pro Bowler 4 times. So in his 16-year career, never made an All-Pro team, never got an MVP vote, made 4 Pro Bowls out of 16 years, was top 5 in passing yards in a season 3 times, and top 5 in touchdowns in a season 3 times out of 16 years. His record was 117 and 117. Okay? He made the playoffs 6 times out of 16 seasons. Does any of that sound like a first ballot Hall of Famer? I would say no.
On the road for 3 of the 4 games in Super Bowl 46. Everybody looks at those big moments in the Super Bowl, but if you go back to 2011 and you look at the NFC Championship game where Eli Manning took an absolute beating against the San Francisco 49ers. I think they sacked him 6 times, over 20 pressures, but he had over 30 completions in that game. And, of course, he delivered when it mattered the most. So, for me, you can look at the metrics, and Eli Manning is in top 10 of a lot of statistical categories as far as passing goes.
He's not. He might have been at this point, but now he's outside of the top 10. He's like 11th in a lot of those numbers. And I'll also say this about the Hall of Fame. I don't think the Hall of Fame should be a place for compilers. Like, because you play 15, 16, 17 years, of course you're going to be high up in, like, you know, stats that you continually compile. Does that make you a Hall of Famer? Playing for a long time is part of it. Longevity is absolutely part of it. But at a certain point, you do have to kind of balance out, like, okay, does he have these numbers because he's just playing for a long time? And that's, like, at that point, is it really a positive?
But when you actually look at what he did and what he meant for the Giants organization, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody that did it better.
What was he like?
Yeah, he should be in the Giants Hall of Fame, sure.
As a teammate.
Well, I mean, he was the consummate professional. I mean, he was, and I know it's cliche, but he was the first one in the building, last one to leave, and he went about his business in a very workmanlike fashion. You had no choice but to respect Eli and how he went about doing what he does. But the thing about it that makes it special is just the level of consistency, because he was the same guy every day. And especially when you talk about a city like New York, when you're under a microscope and there's a lot of scrutiny, whether he played well, whether he played bad, he was steady. And I think that gave the team, I guess, that ability to be consistent. And I think that's a special characteristic, especially playing in this town.
I think you can be a Hall of Famer for your team, drafted by the Giants, kind of. Played whatever it was, 210 games, didn't miss a game, was never injured, played for one team the whole time, got him 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. All that is fine. But that doesn't equate to first ballot Hall of Famer. Joe Flacco had one of the greatest playoff runs ever. Beat Tom Brady on the road, beat Peyton Manning on the road, back-to-back games. How many people can say that? Might be the only person ever. Beat them back-to-back en route to a Super Bowl. Did not throw an interception that entire playoff run. So you're telling me that if Joe Flacco had one more of those runs, he'd be a Hall of Famer? I don't think so. I don't think you can say, well, look how sweet these 2 runs are, and then just say, yeah, put them in the Hall. There's got to be more than that. And I mean, like, Eli, at no point in his career was Eli the best player in the NFL. At no point in his career was Eli a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. In any season. I mean, we just talked about it. He only was top 5 passing yards, touchdowns 3 times. He never led in either. He led in interceptions multiple times. So for a guy who was never great, he was never great for a season. I mean, you could argue he was probably never even like, what's the highest he was? Like maybe the 8th best quarterback in the NFL, 9th, 10th best quarterback in the NFL, something like that. So for a guy who was never great in any individual season, how can you go back and look at that and say, well, over 16 years he was never great, but when you take a look at the career, we'll put him in the Hall of Fame where it's nothing but great people. Like that there seems to be a disconnect. What exactly are we celebrating? We're celebrating a couple of moments, a handful of moments in playoff games, and we're taking the actual career and just shelving that? Put Odell Beckham into the Hall of Fame for his catch. Put him in the Hall. Who cares about his career? He had a sweet moment. I don't know.
People that would say that Eli is not a Hall of Famer will say that he was never the best at his position. His best 5-year span, 11 through 15, he ranked 19th in passer rating, 20th in completion, and 15 in wins. However,
that's horrible. I mean, he just kind of made my point. Well done. Yeah, over his best stretch. What did he say? 19th in passer rating, whatever in completion percentage. Like, he's average in all of the passing statistics. Bang average throughout his entire career. Even wins. The one thing that he's got is the 2 Super Bowls and the 2 Super Bowl MVPs. And is that alone enough to get you in the Hall first ballot?
However, when I look at Eli, I look at the totality of his career. I say playing 16 years and putting up the type of numbers, over 50,000 yards, over 300 touchdowns, those are Hall of Fame numbers. Those are Hall of Fame credentials. And being able to play, and you mentioned it, being able to play in certain cities with the type of media scrutiny that you get here in New York, it's just hard to do, especially with some of the teams, the ups and downs that you've had in the city. So I certainly think that Eli is a Hall of Famer. But you made a point, and I think people need to understand this. The ability to play at a high level.
God, talk about a different time, huh? Coming up, Zion's thrilling 22-point NBA debut, the start of a Hall of Fame career. Yeesh.
For a long time, it's just hard. There's not very many people that can say, I'm going to come to work every single day, and I'm going to be the best every single day. Eli was never quite the best. However, he was consistent, to your point. Then his entire career, he was very good. And I think because of that, he should be rewarded with the Hall of Fame.
Never missed a game due to injury.
It's impressive.
The Iron Man streak that was prematurely ended with the Geno Smith start a few years ago by McAdoo is a part of the resume as well. I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle because I knew this question was coming as soon as it came out yesterday, the retirement was coming. And I take these things probably more seriously than I should. And Eli is, I've said before on the show, you can make as strong of a case for as you can against. So, but I wanted to really like dive into it and figure out how do I really feel. And I'm not going to use the 50,000 passing yards. I'm not going to use the top 10 in touchdowns or all those things because I think the statistical argument in its totality actually works against him a bit.
Yeah, it does, which is not good when you're trying to craft a Hall of Fame career. You know, or a Hall of Fame argument. When you're saying, well, actually the stats are horrible, that's not good. And you start using things like, well, he was an Iron Man. Well, you know, he was a consummate professional. Well, he does the Manningcast. Like, all that's cool. And that probably should get him in the Hall of Very Good and the Hall of Cool. But the Hall of Fame and a first-ballot Hall of Famer has to mean something more. If Eli got into the Hall of Fame in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever, and he eventually ended up there, two-time Super Bowl MVP, whatever, sure. Like if that's how it ends up being, fine. But for him to get in on the first ballot, which puts him in the same universe as Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Drew Brees, puts him in the same world as those players, Brett Favre, I think is insane. There have to be tiers. There has to be a distinction. That's the whole point of the Hall of Fame. The whole point of the Hall of Fame is to distinguish the very best that have ever played in the NFL. And if you take that barrier to entry and you remove it to where it's no longer the very best to ever play, because you cannot sit there and tell me that Eli Manning is one of the very best quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL when at no point in his career was he one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. The two do not exist at the same time. In 16 seasons, I'll say it again, in 16 seasons, Eli Manning was never one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He was one of the good quarterbacks in the NFL, but he was never one of the best. And now he's joining the very best as a first-ballot Hall of Famer, potentially.
Because never first-team All-Pro, no MVP, you know what I mean? Never had statistically regular season stats. He was a good quarterback, not a great quarterback.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that and become a Hall of Famer?
Yes.
With two of the most iconic, not games, but to your point, runs in playoff history. And that is the part that, to me, was the final check mark in the, you know what? Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer, in my mind. Because it's not just that he beat the 18-0 Patriots. It's that 2 rounds prior, he knocked out the best Tony Romo team we ever saw.
I mean, this is nuts. This is nuts. We are the current argument for Eli Manning to be a Hall of Famer is that he beat a really good Tony Romo team in the playoffs. What?
13-3 Dallas Cowboys. You were on that team. The round after that, he knocked out Brett Favre's Green Bay Packers. The last time Favre had a chance to win or go to a Super Bowl with the Packers, the 13-3 Packers. and then the 18-0 Patriots. On that playoff run, he had 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, and a 96 rating. And then 4 years later, what was the route? You guys knocked out the 15-1 Packers, unanimous MVP Aaron Rodgers. Then you knock out a dominant 13-3 San Francisco 49er team in a game, like you said, he got whooped in, he got beat up in route to beating the 13-3 Patriots. On that playoff run, 9 touchdowns, 1 pick, a 103 rating. And I think it's very telling. Eli and his brother both have 2 rings. Everyone knows Peyton's one of the all-time greats.
Right. And there is a difference. But if he goes in on the first ballot, you eliminate that difference. I mean, what did he just say? How many games did he say? Eli's entire argument is built into those games. It's built into an 8-9 game stretch. It is built into that. The fact that you can get into the Hall of Fame because of an 8-game stretch is nuts. And, I mean, Jeremy Lin, put him in the NBA Hall of Fame. You know, again, Odell Beckham had a really cool 2 years. Put him in the Hall of Fame.
But en route to those rings, how did they play? En route to those championships, who was better? Because when we talk about those Super Bowls, we say, oh, your guys' defensive line. That's Eli, his 8 playoff games, the years they won the Super Bowl. 15 touchdowns, 2 picks, 100 rating. That's Peyton, the 2 years he won the Super Bowl. Not just the Broncos year. That includes his Super Bowl with the Colts. 5 touchdowns, 8 picks, a 72 rating. He was, as great as he was in the playoff run, he was along for the ride. Eli...
Yeah, the Broncos run, he could barely even throw.
Once the playoffs began, those 2 years, and maybe the only 2 moments of his career, he was the best guy. He was, as great as your guys' D-line was, as great as those things were, he was the driving offensive force. And if you're going to overcome...
But, like, I mean, you talk about revisionist history. One of the playoff games was like 17-10. Like, he didn't even have... It wasn't even that he had a good game. It's that he had the final drive. You know, like, he wasn't this offensive force. Like, when Nick Foles beat Tom Brady, Nick Foles was insane that game. I think he threw for over 300 yards, had a receiving touchdown, a couple of passing touchdowns, legitimately outdueled Tom Brady. Eli's are a little bit different. All right, so even in those situations, his biggest moments where he's the best player on the field, according to Nick Wright, even in those moments, he's underwhelming in totality. Now, the Mario Manningham throw, incredible. But are you going to put someone in the Hall of Fame on a first ballot because of 1 or 2 throws?
To me, what is a good but not great regular season career, you have to be able to have that up there. Twice, I was nails in the biggest moments, and I didn't get an easy path. I was against 13-3, 13-3, 15-1, 13-3, and he did it. So I'm surprised I'm saying it, but after looking into it, I think he's got to be a Hall of Famer, Canty.
The other thing that he has as a feather in his cap is that he has 2 Super Bowl MVPs. Yeah. Ain't a whole lot of guys walking around with multiple Super Bowl MVPs.
Yeah, and if the MVPs, if it's one of those things where a few years down the road they look at it and they're like, look, he's got 2 Super Bowl MVPs, you know, he's got to be in the Hall of Fame. Okay, fine. But the idea that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, I think this is a watershed moment for the NFL Hall of Fame where you can build your case after you play football. Because there's no doubt in my mind that the Manningcast, how popular the Manning brothers are, whether it's the Saturday Night Live or the commercials or whatever, the fact that they're ambassadors for the league, this is a moment that proves, or this is the first moment that would prove, you can build your case after your playing days are over.
1 of 5, and if you look at the majority of those guys on that list, they in Canton. So, I mean, it seems like it's inevitable that Eli Manning will be putting on a gold jacket.
All right, quickly, does his career record bother you guys that he finished?
Well, again, the 170 and 117, the lack of MVPs, lack of all pros, all that works against him. You have to have
his whole career
card to overcome it.
And
I love how he's like, yeah, I mean, if you look at it, his career hurts him. His good but not great, his 500 record, his no votes for anything, his never making an all-pro team, him being somewhere around good every single year of his career, that hurts him, no doubt about it. But he did have these sweet handful of games, so first ballot. Like, they're answering their own question. I cannot believe I feel like I'm the only person. I feel like I'm the only person that is really arguing against this.
That's
I
big
think
enough.
those 2 Super Bowl runs, not just beating the Patriots, the teams you had to beat.
Yeah, you
on
beat
the
Tony
road
Romo.
in
Yeah.
order to get them. I think it
Playing in
does.
New York helps him too a
Do
little.
you
I mean, insane. Ladies and gentlemen, get on down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Is Eli Manning a first ballot Hall of Famer? Yes or no? Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.